Hello and welcome back to our season 2. This is episode 5. It is the last day of January 2024, and we are bringing in the concepts of alignment that we've been talking about all month here at In the Cortex, and our favorite, well, one of my favorite books ever, which is The Awakened Brain by Dr. Lisa
Yes.
Miller. And so we're going to merge the concepts of alignment and the awakened brain and bringing it together in today's podcast. So let's dive into it.
Let's dive in. I mean, we talked about alignment already on social media and on our first episode of the season of the year. But, a lot of alignment has to do with really getting to know yourself and your own values, right? And so as we talked about in the last one or in the first one, I should say, of this year, we it's hard to know yourself very well and hard to really understand your values if you're in survival mode, right? And I think that that's a lot of the ego that comes in and a lot of the, just disconnection that comes in when we don't really know who we are. We're not really connected with our bodies and our brains, and we think we want things or we think we align with certain things that we later turn out not to align with. So many people, like including you and me, but so many people that do the program are like, so many things have changed about who I am, what I like, what I prioritize, and it's like they are changing, but they're changing back into what they were always meant to be, right? They were what they were
Right.
always supposed to be, so to speak. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really big piece of like understanding that it's also okay to be out of alignment, but knowing the tools to get you into it is going to be a huge deal, right? And so kind of I think we wanted to talk about that today and a lot about the way that it overlaps with this book and with the concept of having a community, because you and I were talking the other day and we're like, one of the biggest shifts that we made at ITC was to really create a community and to put ourselves back into the program, do the programming. And you've heard us talk about it a million times on the podcast, but really like creating a sense of like this is a space for you. Bring your questions, bring yourself, share everything that's going on with you. And I think that's really a good start for anybody, right? Is just find
Yeah.
somebody who can listen to you.
I love that. And to go back to your point about finding who you really are, it's because so many things that we do as humans is we're all just trying to get needs met. And in that process, we have behaviors that, like Paloma said, aren't the real version of us. And as you organize your brain, you realize that those behaviors were rooted in your brain just getting a need met. And it wasn't an
Mhm.
effective and efficient way to get that need met. And so the big part here when you start to organize your brain is you gain awareness, and it becomes natural to start having that self-reflection, self-discovery, and really sometimes that existential question of like, what is your purpose? Like, why are you here on this planet?
Yes.
And so in this process of becoming more aligned with who we are, like I know I've been doing a lot of sifting and sorting in my life, especially having two small kids and wanting them to be connected to community. And then as I dive more into the brain work and then trying to find the community, and then we read this book and we're like, oh, here's all the science behind it. Because we know we always have the people who need the science, right? Paloma
Mhm.
and I are very like Paloma's probably more science rooted than me. I'm more of like I feel it and I'm like, oh, that feels good. I want to keep going there. But then once we find the science, I'm like, there's studies that have been done
It's
on
so cool.
the two different forms of having awareness. And that's really cool. And that's why we love this book because she takes these big, giant concepts of just like oneness and brings in the science and says, here's the studies that show this, this, and this. And we all know it's not that easy to get studies done. So, Dr. Lisa, I know you're listening to this. We love all the work you've done. We appreciate you. So yeah, talking about the two different forms of awareness, and they have in the book here the two modes of awareness available to us at all times are achieving awareness and awakened awareness. And I'm going to read to you what achieving awareness is so you have that sense of what it is. It is the perception that our purpose is to organize and control our lives. When we live through achieving awareness, our foundational concern is how can I get and keep what I want? This mode of awareness is useful and often necessary. It gives us the focused attention and commitment necessary to attain goals and enables us to direct our attention and energy into a particular task to study for an exam, complete a project, get someplace on time, practice a skill. It allows us a focused drive and undistracted execution we need to implement and achieve our goals. It's highly necessary and help in a helpful form of perception. And then she says, but if it's overused or exclusively used, achieving awareness overrides and changes the structure of our brains, carving pathways of depression, anxiety, stress, and craving. When out of balance, achieving awareness is narrowly focused, unguided by the bigger picture, obsessed with the same track or idea, never satisfied, often lonely and isolated. So that's pretty interesting. Like, I mean, that for us, we describe as like survival mode sometimes. Like, you're getting things done, but
Mhm.
it's frantic, it's
Yeah, I
isolated.
mean, it's and I think I like that she's like, it is necessary sometimes
Mhm.
because it is. You have to do things. You have to be like in that activation mode and act in alignment with, your values and who you are. But so many people, and I think I used to be that way. Like, I think a lot of us get stuck in that so easily nowadays in like, the way that the world works. You're just focused on a lot of like material things and a lot of the things that are like kind of like you were saying you don't follow, like or you don't listen to, like, science or seek out the science as much as I do. I was very much like that person. It's like, "This is the thing that you have to do, and this is the way it has to be done, and it's been proven to be this way, so just do it," before I was able to, like, listen to, "Okay, maybe some stuff isn't proven yet," you know what I mean? It can still be real,
Yeah.
and I think that it's kind of like the way that capitalism works in a way, right? And, like, lots of different
Mhm.
social structures that we have. It's like,
Well, yeah.
go
Yeah.
for what's been proven, what you're supposed to do, what's expected of you.
Society's
That's the
expectations.
truth. Because that's, it removes, like I guess it kind of, like, removes questioning from things, like, you're just doing the things, and it gets you in this loop, right? And if you're not in contact with your, like, more awakened self where you're listening to your intuition, listening to different things, understanding concepts in a different way, then you kind of do get stuck in that, like, achieve, 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 right?
Mhm. And it also so then the next paragraph here in this book, The Awakened Brain, she says, when you're in that state of achieving awareness all the time, it doesn't help you face undesirable outcomes.
Mm,
Because if you're always in that achieving awareness, then you're frustrated or you're distressed when things don't turn out as you hoped or planned for. And we all know that feeling, right? Like, I
totally.
really, really need this. And I was actually just talking to my 17-year-old stepdaughter who like really wants something new. She wants a dirt bike and she's like obsessed about it. She hasn't even sold her quad yet. She's like, I just need the dirt bike. Oh my gosh, all of them are sold. Now there's no more left. And we're like, you need to step out. And this is when people say they want to manifest, right? And they want that thing so badly and they become hyper focused on it, then they cannot tap in. And I'm going to read what awakened awareness is next into that state of allowing and trusting you're being guided by something. And that in this book also, she taps into how that is an innate sense of who we like, it's an innate in us of being guided and trusting a higher something within us is a part of it. And we talked
Mhm.
about that in our last episode about the spirituality stuff. And we know that maybe not everyone's there, but there is now science for anyone who maybe doesn't have that sense in them that proves that our humans, we and even all of like the animal kingdom and just all of nature in general, it all is rooted in what is the alpha brain state. And when you're in that state, you are connected to other people and you have a sense of how to have empathy and compassion. And this is where like we'd like to try to break it down so it's very like you're in that state of achieving awareness. Yes, it's great, but if you're only there, that looks like survival mode. That looks like dysregulation. And then you're that
Exactly.
person who's always feeling like you're trying to hold on to and control life too much. And then
Mhm.
nothing's ever working out for you and you're always falling short. So Dr. Lisa just brings a different lens to it of like it's actually because your brain is just operating here and now you're stuck there. And she gives,
Mhm.
the typical things of how do you get out of it? How do you move yourself into an awakened awareness, which is like meditation or prayer or breathing. And we throw in creeping and crawling and
Brain work.
primitive reflex integration because for us that is from the bottom up. You don't have to think your way through it. And there's nothing wrong with all the other modalities, we actually enjoy them
Of
on
course.
top of the brain work. We always say the brain work has to come first because it's the automatic primal part of the brain getting what it needs.
Mhm.
So, awakened awareness, in her book, she writes, we make use of different parts of our brain and we literally see more, integrating information from multiple sources of perception. Instead of seeing ourselves as independent makers on our path, we perceive ourselves as seekers on our path. We look across a vast landscape and ask, what is life showing me now? This awakened awareness allows us to perceive more choices and opportunities available to us, feel more connected with others, understand the relationships between events in our lives, be more open to creative leaps and insights, and feel more in tune with our life's purpose and meaning. And she
Love that.
says, in awakened awareness, we don't lose or forsake our goals, but we take off the blinders. We surrender our tight grip on a goal. We understand that life is a dynamic force and we can attune to and interact with. It's no longer me against the world or me treading upon the world, but me hearing what life has to say, aware that life is meeting me where I am, and I still have wishes and desires and goals. I still experience disappointment and hurt, but I lean into the flow of life, paying attention to where doors open and close. Mm. That's cortex
That's
mode.
cool. That's cortex mode.
That's
That's cortex mode, especially when you align it with the achieving awareness in the way, like when they're both enmeshed. You know what I mean? Because we do
mhm.
need both all the time, and you can't. I also believe you can't only be in awakened awareness all the time because then you're going to lose your grasp on reality. And at the end of the day, there is a fourth dimensional, world that we're living in today, right?
Yes.
You can't lose
Yes.
sight of that. And I think that's easy I think that happens sometimes when people go too far into certain things about like certain spiritual practices. We've all seen it. We've all heard of cults,
Yes.
right? Like I think
Yes.
that's where it is that they're losing the tether to the truth, which is we do have this four-dimensional world that we're in. You know what I mean? No matter what you believe in outside of that. And if you don't, then you know this better than anybody. Like this is where we are. We have this human experience and we do have to acknowledge it, right? And I think it's just easy. It's easy to get stuck in one or the other, and it's hard to find the balance. And the balance is where the alignment comes in, right? Because that's where you truly understand where does this awakened piece and my achieving piece, where do they overlap, and how do I make them overlap more?
Yes. And so we call it alignment, and Dr. Lisa Miller calls it quest. Like the questing
Right.
brain is integrating achieving and awakened awareness together in harmony, right? So
Mhm.
it's being able to discern and it's being able to use your community to bounce ideas off of. And we were just talking about this before the podcast is when you're in a community, you often like kind of like throw out ideas and hey, this came through me. What do you think of this? And then your community can help guide, right? And kind of help you align with here's how we see it, right? So it's great
Mhm.
to feel like you're safe to ask those questions and safe to explore. The problem is,
Yes.
are you receptive to the response and what comes back? And then how do you it's constantly just discerning information, looking at all the cues of what a human is doing and presenting to you, filtering out that's their stuff, that's not mine, but then picking up, "Ooh, they just said that to me." And that hit a core wound in me of like, "Ooh, why did that hurt so much?" So it's
Mhm.
so many layers and nuanced, but this is why finding a community that can support this is huge. And that's why we feel like our In the Cortex community really sees it as,
Oh, totally.
hey, we're all just working on this quest of like
Mhm.
aligning to our most authentic version of ourselves. And the process in the beginning is really hard for a lot of people because it does, like you said in the beginning, isolating in the sense because you're realizing a lot of the things you were doing in the past weren't actually who you were. You were just going through the
Exactly.
motions and the programming that was handed down to you. And so this also carries over into our big thing of when parents begin to go on this quest of going between the awakened and achieving awareness brain, we call it like, being in your cortex and regulated, is when you're able to finally start parenting from a different lens. And this next month coming up is all about parenting. We're really hitting the parenting ground hard because it's very near and dear to my heart because I am a parent. And we're connected to an amazing neuroscientist who's bringing in the science behind the nurturing of parenting. And so this is where, oh man, community needs to also support the views on how you see parenting, which is also a fun one. That's a whole nother layer that
That's
I'm
a whole nother
experiencing.
layer, yeah. And I
We'll
feel
bring
like
that to
that's
another.
something that can be pretty divisive. Like, I see it in my community of, like, my friends and just people that have been friends for so many years and align on so many things, and then they're like, "Yeah, that one thing, the parenting, whatever, let's say, like, spanking or something like that," and they're just on totally opposite sides of the fence. And that's where the judgment starts to come in and a little bit of like, "Oh, I don't wanna hang out with that person," and that's where, like, if you feel like any sort of, resistance in your community, that's when you know you might not be aligning with them anymore, right? And it's not about every single thing 100% being always on the same page, but if you feel like you don't wanna talk to them about certain subjects, if you don't wanna, be yourself around them and you feel like you're not being 100% honest, that's when you know that you're not fully aligning. And it's also part of, like, the journey. Like, this is something else
Mm,
we wanna talk about today is, like, you can have one community for your whole life, but some you can have different ones throughout your whole life. That's the whole point of being a human. Like,
yes.
half of the people that are gonna be meaningful in our lives we haven't even met yet. How crazy is that?
It's really trippy to think about that.
Yeah.
And on that note too of like, but here's another thing. So like being able to understand that not everything is going to perfectly align and having grace
Yes.
and compassion. So, for example, just because you brought up the topic of spanking, which we didn't even have on our notes today to talk about, but it's funny because this has really been coming up very, very prevalently in my world today.
Well, that's probably why I thought of it, yeah.
Yeah, I do not my personal belief is to not spank because I look at it as corporal punishment, and I always am like, "Well, what are you teaching your child when you spank them?" And I actually got into this debate with my fiance. It's actually really funny because we actually had this conversation with his daughters who are now teenagers, and they can actually reflect on it. And he'd always be like, "I never spanked with emotion attached." And I said that to them. I was like, "Your dad thinks that he never spanked you with emotion attached." And they both looked at him and laughed and was like, "Yeah, right, bro. Like you are emotional when you're spanking because your child is not obeying you and doing what you want them to do and it's frustrating to you because that's what's really happening, right?" And so then you have to use some sort of force that's bigger than that child to say, "This
Yeah.
is what I mean," right? And anytime, I'm not gonna lie to you, when my kids get into that space and I'm like getting to that, my pawns is activated. I'm like, you just triggered every single button inside of me because you will not clean up what I've asked you to clean up. I'm dysregulated at that point. I already
Of
know it. I'm
course.
already like, and they can feel like the shift in energy and they like look at me with the wide eyes, like, oh, we pushed mom too far. And there is a feeling in you that's like, okay, this energy is building up. What do I do with it? And you want to just like, hit or
Of
do something that's
course.
primal, right? But what are we teaching our kids? And then we tell them, "No, now you can't go hit your friends." They're like, "But I don't understand. They did something I didn't want them to do, so I hit them. 'Isn't
Yeah,
that
like,
what
I
you
was
just
I
did to
was in the
me?"
same I was in the same mindset that you when you spanked me. I was frustrated with this person. Why am I not allowed to spank them or hit them,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, we could go on and on about that. And here's the thing, we actually had this discussion after we shot our last podcast where we said, "No shame, no judgment." And when we say that, that also is very shamey and judgmental to say that. But we really mean like if it's truly within you that spanking resonates with you, there is a lot of science out there that proves otherwise. And if you're open to wanting to hear why hitting your children is not a good idea, we will provide you with all of that because it's rooted in brain science. It's like your brain shuts down, it goes into survival mode. It's an attack, it's a threat. I don't feel safe around my parent. They're dysregulated and now I can feel that. And that is literally another part in the book about entrainment is when you synchronize to your parent. You synchronize. That's like the whole
Mhm.
quantum physics. It's a real science that has been discovered of explaining energies and how certain things work. And that's why we are big believers in co regulation, but from a state of a calm, regulated parent helping their
Mhm.
child regulate calmly. I actually just did a post today on Instagram. And I couldn't get to that. I wanted to be the spanking parent before I had a regulated nervous system. And then I shifted into a regulated parent and I was like, "Oh, wait, I don't need to be." I never actually
Do
did spank
that.
my
Yeah.
kids, but I had the feeling, the urge, I'm not gonna deny that. And then once I was regulated, I was like, "Oh." I just need to get down to their level, help them borrow my nervous system that's calm, and then they calm. And it just like it's diffused immediately. So
Co-regulation, baby.
it's amazing, and so that's a big part of I went we went on that tangent because there's going to be parts of your community that you don't always align with,
Yes.
and there's messages I hear there's people who take our course, and we might say something like self-love, like, you have to love yourself first before you can love everybody else, but if you're, let's say, a Christian, for example, you don't have that same belief, and what we're asking you to do is not just to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, "Okay, forget it, I'm not gonna listen to anything else you guys say." I'm going to use my discernment and say, hey, that could be just one way of seeing the world. It doesn't mean it has to be. And that's what we're saying too. Like if you spank your children, that's one way that you see parenting. There are other options. Are you open to hearing about different ideas? And so that's what my take on community is. There's definitely things that I go, ooh, I don't resonate with that. Ooh, that's not aligned with me. But I'm going to oversee the big picture and say, but I like the majority of other things. And then I can choose within me, how do I navigate my own children at home? I'm not going to just
Yeah,
turn to spanking them because my community thinks that that's okay. You know what I mean?
exactly. And it's also that's the point of being a human is you get to choose what you align with and what you don't, and you get to go with what resonates with you and what doesn't. But once again, if you're not in connection with yourself, if you're still in survival mode, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what truly aligns with you.
Oh my gosh. And that is basically like when you look at the community as a greater whole of we say this a lot too, is like a lot of people are really lost right now. They don't have
Totally.
a sense of oneness. And we can all agree that COVID divided so many people because
And
it made
isolated.
and isolated, did everything that community needs. It like tore it apart. And we know that like then all of a sudden people just sort of blindly following certain things without asking questions and discerning, does this align with me? Do I actually like this? And there was a lot of division and there's still division on both sides of the political sphere of how you see issues. And I'm like, and I'm all and that's every argument. You're always looking at every argument. Every argument has really three sides, right? Your
Yeah,
side, the other side, and what really happened. So
exactly.
every human interaction is like trying to discern and filter. But what are up with your filters? Are they coming from an awakened space where you're really able to take everything in, come from a space of being connected to somebody because there's that altruistic, I'm a part of a community. I want the whole well-being to really grow and come to the next level? Or is this my ego coming through and my pain and my wounding? And I think I do that now on such a sub I don't know if you do that, Paloma, where you're constantly in environments, and I'm always like, "Okay, I can see why you both are arguing here." And I also can't pick a side because that's what
And
we
I won't.
naturally want to do, but I don't do
Yeah,
that anymore because 'cause I'm just like, "I can see your points and I can see your points. Let's figure out how to communicate through it." But when your brain's
totally.
in an achieved, awareness state, you're like, "But I'm right, and I must win this argument." And then that's where people
Exactly.
dig their heels in and they can't shift, so
Yeah, I've seen, I mean, everybody has seen that happen a
yes,
thousand times.
yes.
And yeah, I think that the pandemic definitely exaggerated that in a big sense. And it created a way that I don't know, that there's like more kind of like moralistic views of different things. And so that made it, and that's happening all over the place, right? That's like canceling people and all that stuff, cancel
Yeah.
culture, all that kind of stuff. It's just another way of finding something that you're going to fight against. Because at the same time, if you think about it, they are finding community though. The people that are
Mm,
fighting in those things,
mhm.
they're finding their community as being on one side or the other, right? So that just to show that we're constantly looking for it in whatever way. I mean, even it's the most natural thing in the world for us because we are animals and we are social animals, right?
Yeah.
So it is the most natural thing. And so I think that even with all this division, even with all this isolation, people are still trying, we're all still out there trying to find somebody that aligns with us in some way.
Right.
Isn't that the first thing you do when you find a group of people? Maybe
Yes.
somebody's wearing a t-shirt that you like and from a band that you like, or
Yes.
somebody mentions a book that you read that you really like, or a TV show, and you immediately are like, oh, I'd love that, blah, blah, blah. And so you start to try to align to create that bond, to create that community. It's the most natural thing.
Yeah.
It's just let's try to do it on positive notes rather than on, fighting.
Right, because we were talking about communities in the world. We're like, well, there are some communities that are definitely rooted in immoral beliefs, and we are not to say that like we're right and they're wrong, but there is a filter of like harming other people is
Is not
not what
okay.
we're talking
It's
about
never
here.
gonna be okay.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's never okay to harm people. And I think this is kind of cool where I think this is where I always say, actually, this was at Costco yesterday. I was with my daughter and she was like hanging on the cart and she was just like swinging her head around, like dancing her own world. And this amazing woman just like stopped and she's like, aren't kids just so great? They can just teach us how to like just be, right? With no feelings of like, oh, am I doing something wrong? And they're just like free. And we do want an element of like how, harnessing it in and not having too much freedom with kids, like maybe wreaking havoc on things and like destroying property. But the sense of a kid just being completely free is like so just liberating and so fun to
Mhm.
watch. And as humans, we have packed on so much hurt into our lives that we can't even live in that state anymore. And you see it with animals too. They just don't really care about things. And I've always had we have a big white dog and his name is Hank. And I'm always like, I just want to live like Hank. Like, yeah, I might bark at a few people when they walk by the house, but ultimately he just like has love in his heart and eyes and he just wants to love and be connected to literally everything.
He's the sweetest boy
Yeah.
ever.
So I think this is where we do have a lot to connect with kids and animals. And the thing about this is they're very much living in a brainwave, the alpha brainwave. And this is
Exactly.
where and this is why this book is so fascinating because there's so many studies in here about um, just how alpha is connected to the earth and how it's literally the
Mhm.
wavelength, the hertz, it's between 8 to 12 hertz that comes up from the earth's crust and about a mile up. And that is what like all animals operate on. You know how animals have just like this way of like connecting and
Radar,
like
yeah.
and kids too, they are very good at like, if a person walks in the room and their like wavelengths or vibe, people call it, is off, like a kid and an animal can immediately sense it, right?
Mhm.
And so it's because they're so connected to something that us adults, we lose that over time. So
Mhm.
finding the way to get connected to your alpha state is important for being able to live in that state of awakened awareness. And this book will give you all the science in there, all the studies that have been done about all these amazing, like healing things that can happen when you live in this state. And basically, we're built to comfort and love and help each other heal. And so, finding a community that can help you get there is so important for your human experience. And that's basically what we're here to share is that there's hope at every second of your life. Our oldest member now, Paloma, is 90.
I know.
And that is a sign that, like, the brain can change at any age. Yes, it's harder as you get older, but
Mhm.
there's hope for you if you're listening right now. If you're like, I have been a parent that I didn't want to be, or I'm a friend I didn't want to be, or I am in relationships I don't know why I keep having, this is your sign. There is
Yes.
so much science that proves that you have the ability to find the truest version of you, to find that awakened awareness. And our ITC community supports that. And we allow all walks of life into our world, and we just hold that loving, compassionate space, and we hope you wanna join it.
Yes, join us. It's awesome. It's so fun too. Like we really do. We get silly, That's what we do. We're a
We
couple of
love
silly
getting
geese right here. And yeah, ultimately it's all about helping, each other find the way to align and be ourselves. Thank you for being here. Remember to subscribe and to like and to rate and to share it with anybody that you think might like this podcast. Hopefully, lots and lots and lots of people. But our make sure to follow us on social media. Our Instagram is in the cortex underscore US. Our TikTok is in underscore the underscore cortex. Our Facebook is in the cortex US. Our YouTube is In the Cortex US. Our website is www.inthecortex.com, and our email is hello@inthecortex.com. If you ever have any questions, you're wondering if this is for you, let us know. Just send us a little email. We're here.
Yes, y en español
Oh,
tenemos.
in the Cortex underscore ESP en español. And we have two important announcements today. One is that we are participating in the Nurture Revolution retreat, which is not a physical retreat, it's a virtual retreat. It's going to be happening from February 12th through 17th. 13th through 17th, sorry. And we participated with a really fun video called Neuro Reset for Parents. So it's kind of for any parents that are watching. This whole summit is amazing. It's organized by Greer Kirschenbaum and one of her colleagues, Rocio, and they are both neuroscientists, and they are studying everything to do with nurturing and parenting, and why people should parent. Not we, because I'm not a parent yet, but we as a society should parent in a different way than we have for the past many, many, many years. And they have all the scientific proof behind why we shouldn't focus on nurturing rather than punishing our children. And yeah, that's one thing. Please find the link the link to sign up. We can put in the show notes and at the link in bio. And then, of course, as usual, if you've heard this before, you've probably used the promo code already. But if today's the day that you're like, okay, now I'm going to sign up, the
I
promo
need the
code,
community. Yeah.
I need the community. I want it. I'm seeking it. Then Brainiac. You know why? Because we're all Brainiacs. And you're going to get $10 off the first payment of your program. And then it'll be super fun. You'll be on the WhatsApp group and we'll hang out on our Cortex chats, and it's going to be amazing. So use
Yes.
it there.
100%. Thank you
Yes.
for being here, and we
Thank
look forward
you.
to more connections.
Exactly.